Welcome to the complete guide to a better Malasana. Malasana is our foundational low squat pose in yoga, but it's definitely a pose that many people struggle with, feel uncomfortable, feel kind of limited. And so for that reason, we created this video to share some of our top tips for improving your ability to practice Malasana with ease. And we will start with our top alignment and positioning tips to help you find a more easeful squat. And then we will share our top strength exercise tips that will really help support you in this pose. So I'm Jenny and this is Travis. And we are the co-founders of Strength for Yoga, where we teach yogis how to build yoga-specific strength. So Travis, what's up with the alignment pointers that we have to share?
Well, Jenny, the I often have heard, and I don't know about you, that there's a certain right way to practice Malasana.
I've definitely heard that.
And I disagree, and I think you do too. So sometimes you might hear, oh, you have to have your feet a certain distance apart. Maybe it's hip width or shoulder width or something like that. And you have to have your toes straight ahead. And maybe you've tried to practice Malasana in that way and it just doesn't feel right to you and your body. I know that's how it feels to me. It doesn't feel right. So what we're advocating is that you don't have to follow that cookie cutter template, and you
Yes.
can practice Malasana however feels good to you. And so the principle that we'll refer to is the principle of self-organization, which is just a fancy way of saying that you can squat however it feels good to you. So in particular, and related to the shape in the lower body in Malasana, that just means that you can stand with your feet as wide as you want, and you can stand with your toes flared in or out as well. Maybe I don't know that anybody would do it in necessarily,
That's a little
but
tough, but
straight ahead or flared out as much as you want. Even to the point where maybe one foot is a little bit more forward and one foot is a little bit more flared out, because people are different from side to side.
that's right.
So for you, like, what's your preferred?
For me, I prefer like to feel most comfortable.
Mhm.
Feet a little, maybe about shoulder distance. I hear a lot like in the yoga world, hip
They say
distance, but
hip,
that's
yeah.
pretty
That's
narrow.
narrow, yeah.
Yeah. So for my body, I know I'm more comfortable, a little wider and usually a little turned out.
Hmm.
But that's just me. Everybody's different.
Right.
Some people might
Yeah.
want more turnout. Some people don't need that. So something like this is for my body feels comfortable.
Awesome.
Yeah. So do you think like a good suggestion would be for people to just experiment with this and kind
Right.
of try various
Right.
ways?
So try it narrow, try it wide, try it straight, try it flared out, try one out, one in. Like, just try it until it feels right to you. And maybe
Exactly.
even from day to day, that's different, and that's perfectly fine.
So those are just some tips as far as like how to position yourself, but we have a couple of other tips that are still alignment tips, but they involve props.
Yep. So if you happen to have a blanket handy, this can be a really good way to gain some comfort if your heels are coming off in the bottom of your
So if you like
Malasana.
squat down and then this
Yeah.
happens, right?
So this is a Malasana requires a lot of ankle mobility into dorsiflexion, which is our knees coming past our toes and our toes coming up towards our shins. So to alleviate that or reduce the amount of dorsiflexion that you need, you can start with your heels elevated, which puts your toes or ankles in a position of plantar flexion to start. So that when you descend down, you're still dorsiflexing, but you don't need to be in as much dorsiflexion to get into that low squat and still keep your heels down on the blanket.
That's right. So you could use a blanket or a towel or like
Hmm.
a wedge if you have like a yoga wedge, anything that
Hmm.
elevates your heels a bit
Hmm.
can make it more comfortable.
Hmm.
So that's one good prop usage for Malasana. What's
Yeah.
another one?
And then another one is if you happen to have a couple of blocks handy, one or two, depending on what you need, you can stack them and then actually just perform your Malasana in a seated,
I love this
uh,
one.
bearing the load through your hips, through your
Yes.
seat, as opposed to entirely through the legs.
So like here's two blocks stacked up. And then if that was like too much of a lift, if you didn't quite need that, then maybe it's one block, maybe up on the that height there, or if that's like still, too much, then maybe down on the low height. So that wraps up what we wanted to talk about as far as like alignment and positioning pointers. But now we want to talk about what if you actually want to make some proactive positive change, like in your
Hmm.
mobility in your body
Hmm.
that will help support a better squat.
Right.
So we have
So
selection,
yeah,
right?
and these would be exercises that you would practice over time.
Yeah.
Maybe doing it once and then trying your Malasana over again could feel better right away. But we're really saying, hey, this would be something you would do over a few weeks, months, and that over time you might see a difference in your Malasana.
Yes. So what is our first strength exercise?
Our first strength exercise is called the knees over toes split squat. So a split squat is a single leg dominant squat, or how would you describe this? Going from a low lunge into a split stance. And what is unique about this is that Jenny is really focusing on diving that front knee forward into that dorsiflexed position to get that ankle range of motion. So it's awesome for strengthening the quadriceps, the muscles on the fronts of the thighs in the front leg, as well as mobilizing the hip flexors, which isn't super relevant to Malasana, but is nice in general, but then really getting that ankle flexibility through that full range of motion.
Right, right. So just for comparison, like a regular split squat would be more up and down,
Yeah,
right?
it's like an elevator,
Like this.
and this is like more
But what we're, yeah,
forward.
this is what we're recommending for ankle mobility.
And maybe you've heard like, oh, your knees should never go past your toes, and we disagree.
Yeah.
You know, when it's done with intention and for this purpose, it's great for producing some positive adaptations in the ankle.
Absolutely. What's our second strength exercise?
Our second strength exercise is also related to the ankle. So this is calf raises. And particularly, we're showing deficit calf raises, which Jenny is doing on yoga blocks. You could also just do it on a stair or a step in your house with a railing handy. So doing it against the wall is nice because you just have a little bit more stability and balance. She's not like pulling herself up from the wall. Her fingertips are just on there for support. So the deficit, the reason that we do that is by having the toes elevated. Now the heels can descend lower than the toes, and she can get a really good stretch of the calves into dorsiflexion. And so she pauses for a second in that bottom position, feeling a really good stretch through the calves, and then she elevates up onto her tiptoes and pauses a section there in that fully contracted position.
Exactly. And that's a really good way to increase calf strength, but ankle mobility, which then we could take with us into our squat.
Right. So checking two boxes at the same time in terms of building that calf strength, but also getting that loaded stretch in the bottom position, which should transfer well into our Malasana. Exercise 3 is our straddle lift. So this is a combination of a squat and a deadlift from the strength training world. It's squatty because it's a more upright position, similar to Malasana, right? It's technically maybe a deadlift in the strictest sense because you're picking up the weight from the floor in a dead stop and your hands are down. But so this is a nice hybrid. Again, Jenny has her feet elevated on yoga blocks so that she can get into a deeper range of motion and the floor is not stopping the kettlebell. And so she's just descending into essentially a very similar position to her Malasana, and she's strengthening through that entire range. And the weight actually gives her that nice loaded stretch that she then has to counteract using the muscular engagement from her lower body.
Precisely. It's yet another one that's a good combination of strength and flexibility at the same time. Next exercise.
This one is a little bit of a finer detail here. So we've talked a lot about the ankles in Malasana, and we've thought a lot about the lower body, right? But there's also the upper body. And so in Malasana, sometimes it might feel like you're having a hard time lifting your chest or keeping your torso upright. It might feel a little bit hunched over. Not the end of the world by any means, but if you were wanting to keep that chest a little bit more upright, we have an exercise for that. So the exercise is called thoracic spine extensions. The thoracic spine is the part of the spine that is your upper and mid back. And so we are trying to lift that chest off the floor from this prone position, this face down position. It's just going to be a small range of motion, and we should really feel the extensor muscles, the muscles on the upper back, working to create that lift. The reason that Jenny has the yoga block here behind her neck is just to kind of lock everything in above so that she's not just craning through her neck to create that lift, but it's actually coming from the upper back. If you didn't have the block, you could very well do it without it, but it's a nice way to kind of isolate that motion to just the thoracic spine.
Yeah, one of my longtime favorites. I love that exercise. So that's good for thoracic spine extension. And now we have a final grouping of 3 exercises.
Yes. So all three of these exercises are goblet squat variations. A goblet squat is when we hold the kettlebell in what we call the goblet position. The reason that it's called that is like you could imagine drinking out of a goblet in ancient times. And so the weight is held at the chest, and then a goblet squat is just squatting in and out of that position. The wrinkles that we're adding will show 3 different ones. So the first one is called a prying goblet squat. And for our purposes, because this is a Malasana focused video, we're just going to stay in the bottom shape, which looks very much like Malasana, right? And the prying idea is that Jenny has pushed her elbows into her thighs to give her a little bit more of a stretch of the inner thighs or adductors. And then she's kind of shifting from one side to the other, a little bit of rotation to bias one side at a time. And so she can just go back and forth from one side to the other, nice and slow, a little bit of a flow, and she should feel a nice stretch through her inner thighs with that. Next one is called a goblet squat with a bicep curl. So in this one, again, Jenny will just descend into the bottom of her squat, and then she's going to perform bicep curls. So yes, this is absolutely good for the arms and good for some of our pulling muscles, our biceps, which we don't get a lot of work in yoga. But it's also just the idea that we are changing the relationship of the weight to ourselves in the bottom position. So as we lower the weight and it gets farther away from us, that tends to help us lift up a little bit more, and it just creates a different stabilization pattern and different muscles that are working. Maybe you feel that in your core as well.
I do, and I also feel it in my thoracic spine again.
Amazing.
Like as I lower it down, I feel that after work to.
Yeah. So there's a lot of nice things that are happening here from a muscular engagement standpoint that then if we took the weight away and practiced our Malasana, we might feel a difference right after doing that or as we practice over time.
And then one more goblet squat variation.
Our final goblet squat variation.
I'm using a lighter weight personally for this.
Yeah.
Switching.
So we call this the goblet squat with a heartbeat, and you'll see why in a second. So Jenny descends to the bottom of her squat or her Malasana, and then she's going to press the kettlebell out to a straight arm position and then bring it back in. So when she presses it out, yes, she is working her shoulders quite a bit into that front. We call this a front raise position. But also she has to create more stability through her core, through her torso, more pressurization with that weight out in front of her. Also probably feeling that more in the upper back too, because it's trying to bend her over. And so she's trying to stay as upright as she can.
Travis, does that wrap up everything we wanted to present about Malasana?
I think it does.
For a complete guide to a better Malasana.
Yeah.
I already feel better in my Malasana.
Amazing. Yeah. So like after doing all those things, if you were to retest, like how does that feel different to you than it did when you were fresh off the street cold coming in?
Yes, totally more warm, more easeful, but also a little tired.
Fair.
Personally.
Yeah. So don't necessarily do all of those things in one day. I mean, you could, but maybe pick a few and maybe just, some of the lower body, some of the upper body, some of the legs, ankles, and mix and match, but not everything in one day because that might tire you out.
Right. But they can all be so potent for improving your Malasana and finding that goal of this video, the complete guide to a better Malasana. If you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on all the tips that we share.